All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA DFS video. First and foremost, sorry about yesterday's live stream. Not really on our end, an issue on our end, but the company that we kind of do our live streams through, they figured out the issue, so we should be good to go on that. That being said, if you guys leave a comment, we should be able to pull it up. So we made a slight improvement just for that. So kind of excited for that feature. But we got Nick here. What are your kind of thoughts on the small 2-game slate that we have going?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Dame was a game time decision. Now we're hearing Giannis is as well. So, until we have this news, we really don't know. I think we're going to have to kind of talk about three scenarios for Milwaukee. It's going to be if Dame and Giannis play, if just Dame plays, if just Giannis plays. And that's probably going to be the key to the slate. Markel Fultz questionable as well in the second game, but he went through shoot around. I think he's going to be good to go today. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Bucks only 2-point favorites on the road in Indiana. The line opened at -4, so it's closing. That kind of gives us the hint that someone's going to be sitting. I was thinking it'd just be Dame, but now maybe it's Giannis as well. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's pretty much the slate right there.
Yeah, that's obviously going to be the slate difference for sure, and we'll go through the process of figuring out kind of which two we should be going in on there, or kind of where we'll be going there with the Bucks. And I mean, there's not too much other injury news. We know that like Wendell Carter's out. I mean, we can start and go through the news. We'll just kind of go team by team on the news, and then we'll go position by position. And just as an FYI, guys, as well, there is a slight longer delay. I think it's like a full minute on the stream right now. So if you guys have any questions, just know that there'll probably be like a minute to a delay to answering said questions. Okay, just as an FYI. But we'll go ahead and start out with, let's just talk about the Atlanta Hawks. They should be good to go. No injury concerns there, right?
Yep. Sounds like they're healthy. They're running a pretty deep rotation. I actually think we're going to get some good value out of there. But yeah, really nothing we need to worry about, at least currently, as far as injuries go.
Okay, so then we'll go ahead and move on into the Pacers, another team in which, for the most part, pretty much good to go, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything listed. Refreshing a couple news sources now, but yeah, nothing is telling me that we have anything to worry about here either. So
that's the easy part of the slate. Now we'll go ahead and get into Milwaukee. So right now, Dame currently a game time decision. Giannis currently a game time decision. To me, as a Bucks fan, I know it's a different coaching staff and whatnot, but this is something that we kind of saw last year a little bit, where one of the stars would sit out on the back end of a back-to-back. We already saw Chris Middleton sit out on the front end, and to me, it makes sense for one of Dame or Giannis to sit. The question becomes which one, and if one of them do sit, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key right there. I was building earlier as though Dame would be out and Giannis would be in which case Giannis quickly becomes the most appealing pay-up option on the slate. I don't think that surprises anyone. But yeah, obviously, if that flips and Dame's in and Giannis is out, then Dame's going to look really appealing. But I guess what we'll need to talk through the most is probably if they're both out. I mean, we're going to have Middleton, who's going to dominate the usage when he's on the floor. But I still think he's limited to 24, 26 minutes a night. So he's tough to prioritize. Even at a reasonable 6K tag on both sides. So guys like Malik Beasley are going to become very interesting. Campaign, I think if Dame's out, regardless of whether Giannis is in, is going to become appealing as the starting point guard there. But yeah, I mean, it's just really a trickle-down effect. Like, we're going to have to look at Bobby Portis. We're going to have to look at Brook Lopez. We're going to have to look at Campaign. But yeah, I mean, other than Campaign, if Dame's out, it's tough to really firmly say who we're going to be on. Obviously, Portis, probably if Giannis is out. Like, those are the two direct plays, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as just playing the guy that's filling in. I mean, Dame and Giannis are two of the highest usage players in the league. So there's going to be a lot to go around, and everyone's going to seem underpriced if they're both out.
Yeah. And I did just pull up the question, someone asking about kind of what to do with Dame. I think you nailed it. We got another question coming in here as well, and I'll touch on the Bucks. We got Ian wondering, and I'll just pull it up. Are you from Milwaukee or are you from Madison? I'm in between those two spots. I don't know. I always feel weird giving too much personal information on the internet, but in between that, the two locations there. But yeah, for Milwaukee here, guys, and I'll just pull up the question again here about kind of Dame and whatnot. My expectation, and I think you nailed it, is that if Dame sits, we're just loading up on Giannis. we're loading up, maybe even on Brook. We saw last year that, with Middleton out or with Drew out, that Brook was someone that really stepped up. But then again, we have the whole issue of whether it'll be Brook or Portis. That was the whole issue that we had last year as well. So that'll be a headache. And then it is a different team. Like we got Crowder, who was a stud last night in terms of value. Will Middleton play more minutes? That's another question that we have. Marjan Beauchamp is someone that got 27 minutes last night, and I'm wondering if that was because it was the front end of back-to-back or if that was just because they wanted to get him more run. He could be someone that we're looking at. So my question to you, to throw it back to you, is with Milwaukee, if we get news that Dame or Giannis sits, how many bucks would be too many bucks? 5, 6? Because obviously on 2-game slate, we probably want to load up on them.
I mean, I think the limit on FanDuel is 4 and the limit on DK is 5, right? I think 4 on both sites makes sense. I'm just trying to think out loud here. Like, I would definitely want Payne. I would definitely want Crowder. I would definitely want Portis, Beasley. I guess 5. You could probably do 5 on DK. And again, it's because they're so cheap. It's not like I love any of these plays to go for 50 fantasy points or anything like that. But they're priced where you don't need that. They're priced where – sorry, my phone keeps going off for some reason. But they're all going to look like great value. So, yeah, I think if they're both out, Payne's going to be in your low-risk builds. Beasley's going to be in your low-risk builds. Lopez, Portis, and Crowder probably. And then, I don't mind Beauchamp or Connaughton, but they're kind of secondary options for me.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it is interesting. But I will say this. I mean, looking back to last night when AD was out for the Lakers, I mean, this isn't the best example because that game blew out, but no one was really on Hachimura, and D'Lo was a little bit lower owned than he should have been compared to Reeves and LeBron. So maybe we see a similar situation here where the chalkiest bucks aren't necessarily the best bucks. Like if Lopez is low owned and Portis is 80% owned, definitely make some pivots because that's definitely a logical play we've seen shake out in Lopez's favor in the past.
And one thing I just want to point out as well, like this is still going to be a good matchup regardless. So we did get a question coming in. It's like, which 2 games or which game would you rather be prioritizing? I would say probably this one because like there's going to be value and it's supposed to be a high scoring game. The Pacers are going to be a team that we want to attack the whole season. But then again, we'll go ahead and get into Orlando's situation for news and stuff as well because they are going to be without Wendell Carter. We know that for sure. We are currently projecting Markelle Fultz to have some minutes. He was questionable to start the day. It's looking like he's going to play, but he could sit as well. And then we also have Gary Harris out. So we could have some value in this game as well, although we've had this situation before, so it's not as good a value. But is there anyone you're looking at here?
Yeah, and I want to say this first, just to go back to the question about which game's more appealing. If Giannis and Dame are in, I think the second game's more appealing because we're going to have to get value from it. But again, if one or both of them are out, then I agree with you that the first game is the more appealing of the two. But I mean, if we're assuming everyone's healthy on the slate, like the more underpriced plays are Okongwu on DK, where he's too cheap. Even splitting the minutes with Capella as the backup, he's too cheap over there. So we're seeing him come in as chalk. Bogdanovich looks too cheap over on DK. I mean, Jalen Johnson's reasonably priced on both sides. So I think if everyone's healthy, then really, I mean, the best value is coming from Atlanta, which is kind of crazy to say. I mean, I do like Goga on both sides. I don't want to leave him out. I mean, especially on FanDuel, where you don't have that Okongwu value, I think it makes sense to get to a lot of Goga over on FanDuel, but he is going to be popular. So, yeah, I mean, if we're going to make the assumption that everyone's healthy, even Sadiq Bey on both sides feels a little bit too cheap. And it's not like, again, I feel great about any of these plays, but on a 2-game slate, you're going to need value to fit a guy like Giannis or Halliburton or something like that. So, yeah, a lot of this Atlanta value looks good, and I don't want to just brush over Murray and Trey. I think they're both excellent plays. But yeah, it really comes down to the first game of the news how we're going to be building because if Dame and Giannis are out, what can we pay up for other than Halliburton, other than Trey, other than maybe Banchero? But if one of those guys are in, you're going to want them in almost all of your lineups. So it really, really depends on the news in the first game. But I definitely think there's pieces from both of these teams in the late game we're going to want. Primarily Goga on both sides for the Magic. Fultz, I think, is underpriced if he's in starting. And then Atlanta's just riddled with value throughout.
Yeah. We did get a question coming in, or just kind of a statement. Suggs is supposed to be a stud. And you know what? Pat, it was us. Pat ourselves on the back right now because when Cole Anthony was chalk, we were like, please don't do it, guys. We were begging. And he still ended up being pretty chalk, and I was just like, okay, that's why people are watching our videos, though. It's just like,
right.
But yeah, Suggs has been good. Don't get me wrong, but are you kind of getting a little bit of cold feet on him, or are you going back to the well with him because he should be a good play regardless of if Fultz is out because Gary Harris is out?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to like game theory. Like the reason he's not as good of a play with Fultz in is also the reason he's almost a better tournament play with Fultz in because he's going to be lower owned. The thing about Suggs is when he's on the floor, he's super aggressive, very high fantasy point per minute rate, but the minutes have been inconsistent with him. It's very rare we're seeing him get to 30 minutes, but again, he's so productive when he is on the floor that I think even with Fultz in, it's not going to hurt his productivity necessarily. Yeah. So I like him. I'm going to like him more if he's low owns. And I think in lineups where you're not using Fultz, it makes a lot of sense to make that pivot.
Yeah. It's funny. Cole Anthony's pulling in as slightly higher owned. Do have a question though. So Markelle Fultz, he is currently as the chalk as you can be on the slate, pretty much 63, 52%. Is that where it might be a little bit too high, especially if we do get that Bucks value? Or is that just, he's too cheap. He should be higher priced. Let's just eat the chalk.
I mean, the thing is, I think the ownership projections have Giannis and Dame both in right now. Like we're seeing Giannis is 50% on DK, 70 on FanDuel, Dame 20, 40 respectively. So if they're out, then we're definitely going to see that ownership plummet on Fultz because we're going to have all that value with the Bucks, the campaigns, the Crowder, maybe Connaughton, but you get what I mean. So, like, as things stand, I think he is one of the safer pieces of chalk. But I don't expect things to stand necessarily. And again, we're dealing with new coaches in Milwaukee. Like, if this was Bud, we might be able to get a better read on this. And I think Giannis probably plays here. And doesn't. But, yeah, again, new coaching staff. Maybe this is gamesmanship. Luckily, it is the first game on the slate, though.
That's where, like, if we do get the news, that could really shift the ownership away, which would be awesome. But I do just want to kind of mention that with Giannis, like, did you see the technical fouls yesterday that he had?
Oh my God, tossed out?
Yeah, he is going to be motivated to play well in this game if he plays in it, and it's an easy match.
He's rested. He missed almost the whole second half.
Honestly, so that's where I'm like, he's probably going to play, whereas Dame could sit. But at the same time, their depth, like they're running out campaign, and Wigginton is fine, but I see even with the team, I don't know.
Yeah, I think AJ Griffin would be the backup behind.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then Beasley probably running a little point, or Chris Middleton, or freaking Giannis. It doesn't matter. I don't think too much, but the fact of the matter is the usage would be all over the place. But let's go ahead and get into the top guard plays on this slate. We do have another question here. Let's see. On short slates, and I'll just pull up the question here. What am I doing? That's why we have this feature. Yeah. Can you see the questions? That's my question.
Yeah. I can see them too, which is awesome.
Gotcha. Do you want to answer this one while I get the guard slide ready?
Yeah. Sounds good. So, I mean, I think it depends on the slate. The thing about the smaller slates is the chalk is always chalk for a reason. Like on bigger slates, though, it's easier to get away from. It's easier to find pivots. So you almost have to eat some of the value. But yeah, I think it is a good strategy to play mostly chalk. And then if you have two guys that are sub 15% owned on a 2-game slate, you're going to be very, very different. So yeah, I think you do want to kind of lean into where the field's going, but kind of pick and choose your spots. Like, let me just sort by DK on my screen right now. Like we have Okongwu, Fultz, Bogdan, Giannis as chalk, saying everyone's healthy. To me, I think the easiest pivot might be to maybe go to a low on Goga instead of Okongwu, or keep Okongwu and maybe go off of Fultz and go for Suggs, something like that. But yeah, I think you take 4 or 5 of the big pieces of chalk, look at the value in the model and see that they're all scoring relatively well. So it makes sense. And then, just pivot 1 or 2. Pick your spots. But chalk in NBA is chalk for a reason. It's not going to hit every night, but it is the most projectable sport by far. The field continues to get sharper. So usually when you see a player projecting as chalk, it's for a reason. You're going to start your single entry and low risk lineups with those plays. But yes, you do need to get a little bit different, especially in single entry. I would say don't build all guys that are like 30% plus. Try to get 2 under 15%. I think that's a good starting point. And if you can't find 2 under 15%, maybe get 3 around 20%, or just kind of scale it that way. But yeah, start with the chalk and then differ from there. I think that's a good way to go in NBA.
And then just as secondary point to that, like with Milwaukee, if we do get news that like Dame or Giannis were to sit one of those two, then I think it might be worthwhile to just try to get lucky with Connaughton or Beauchamp or someone like that that could be lower owned, but at the same time, their ownerships will spike as well, probably to 15 to 20%, like you just mentioned.
Right.
But let's go ahead and take a look at the guards that we have in the slate. So looking at it right now, it doesn't feel like the OF index rating on the guards is not as high as I feel like it typically would be. Trey's pretty high, Halliburton's pretty high, but then we have Dame, DeJounte Murray's pretty high considering his price tag. So is Markelle Fultz. And then we're looking at Chris, not as good, Bruce Brown, Bennett Mathurin, Jalen Suggs not ranking out as well, Cole Anthony, Malik Beasley, Buddy Hield. Then we can kind of just list them all up. But do you see like an actual starting point here? I mean, probably Fultz, but other than that, is there a starting point for you here guard-wise?
Yeah, I mean, if you're sorting by value, Trey actually does show up on both sides. So if Milwaukee's healthy, and again, we're speaking in hypotheticals, so it's very difficult. I think he is very appealing as a guard play. I will say you could get Murray for 1K cheaper on both sides. He's actually been just as productive to start the season. So I think I'd want one or the other of the Atlanta guards with Fultz. And I do just want to touch on this before I forget. He's only small forward on FanDuel, but we see Bruce Brown popping here. He's been chalk on FanDuel the past few nights, like inexplicably over-owned. Like we're seeing 40% on him on a 14-game slate. Tonight he's projecting around 50%. Obviously that'll go down if the Milwaukee plays, if some of that value opens up. But I'll say the first piece of chalk on FanDuel I'll be fading is Bruce Brown. And I like the player. But yeah, it's just insane to me that he's going to be over 50% owned. He's not a consistent fantasy producer.
No.
Yeah, he's just not. And he's a good guy to have on your team, good defender, etc. But glue guys don't really help you in fantasy, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, this is kind of, I feel like it's just, this is the correct price tag for him on FanDuel, but there's still a little bit of playoff bias there where people are just like thinking he's a better player than he actually is. I don't know. It's weird. Like 52%, I think it should be half of that.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen him have big games in the past, but when he's going to be on the floor with Turner and Halliburton, there's not much usage left for him at all. And we've also seen Mathurin put up some big numbers this season, Buddy Hield when he comes in off the bench. So, yeah, he's just not one of the top options on this team. And I mean, when some of these other guys are ruled out, we do see those outlier games out of him. But I just can't project him that well when we have Halliburton healthy and most of the starting lineup healthy as well.
I think it's worth noting is that with the Pacers, they're also on the back end of back-to-back as well. So, like, we could see some kind of more strange minutes. Maybe Andrew Nembhard gets a little bit more run than he typically would. Maybe Buddy Hield actually plays 30 minutes in this game instead of 25 that he's been playing. Like, that wouldn't be too crazy, but I mean, Bruce Brown's an easy fade, I would say, at DraftKings for sure, too. But he's only 7% owned. And speaking of FanDuel, the ownership is a little bit more concentrated, it seems like. We got Mathurin pulling in 61%, Bruce Brown, Fultz, Murray, and Lillard, and Halliburton. I mean, there's a lot of the guards that are over like 33%, whereas DK, it's about the same, but it's a little bit more spread out. Is there anyone other than Bruce Brown that you'd probably be fading? Like, is Mathurin that good of a play there? I mean, that's pretty much it.
That's the thing. I think they're both over-owned, but like odds are one of them has a good game. So I don't know. I don't think I'm going to have many lineups with Mathurin and Brown if things are as they stand. I'm fine with one or the other. You're going to need some of that value, but there's a lot of good value on Atlanta too. At the guard positions, not as much, but once we get to forwards, I think we'll talk about some of that. But yeah, I mean, Brown and Mathurin are inconsistent. I do think they're underpriced for their ceilings, but we're not going to get ceilings out of both of them most nights. So, yeah, I think they're pretty easy to get away from compared to some of the other chalk we're seeing in guys like the pay-ups for Atlanta and then Fultz for Orlando.
Yeah. So kind of, I'm going to just put Fultz into like kind of the first look build a little bit here, or, review. Just because I do think that's a good starting point right now. But again, like, you could have a nice pivot there. Whether he plays is a big question mark. And then obviously the Milwaukee stuff. But we'll go ahead and move on into the forwards here. And so looking at the forwards, let me pull it up. We do have potentially Orlando being in good spots. But again, the OF rating isn't as high as you typically want on normal. So obviously it's a 2-game slate. We actually have Jalen Johnson pulling in as one of the better plays. Chris Middleton, even at reduced minutes, is pulling in as a pretty good play. kind of where do you see your priorities going for this? Is it just paying up for Giannis, maybe going a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, I think if Dame's out, I'm definitely paying up for Giannis without question. If Dame's in and Giannis is in, I don't think you need him in your first build. Like he's still going to be a good play, but we have seen him limited minutes this season. Obviously, the usage is down with Dame on the floor. I don't know. I do like Bonchero. I don't like that the price is up. I don't like that Fultz is back because the thing about the Magic is they look decent here, but they're all kind of priced as though Fultz is out. He's been out for over a week, so I think the pricing algorithm on both sites it hasn't really accounted for that. So yeah, I do like Atlanta. I do like Johnson. I prefer him to start, but I think either way, he's been super productive. I'm fine with him in the mid range. And then yeah, I think it kind of depends on the site. Like I really like Bogdanovich over on DraftKings. I don't mind him on FanDuel, but he's almost 1K more over there. And then yeah, DeAndre Hunter. Probably wouldn't want him in lineups with Johnson, but I think he's okay too. It's like nothing here feels great, honestly. And like it's kind of you can probably hear it in the tone of my voice. Like I'm not excited to get to any of these guys. I think the Magic guys are fine. I do like Johnson, but again, they're all priced where they should be. You're really not getting much meat off that bone.
Yeah. You mentioned Bay, and I think that might actually be one of the better Atlanta plays just because he's priced down.
Yeah.
Yeah, on DraftKings. And you can just fit more better plays into your build with him. I actually don't mind the Bogdanovich call as well on DraftKings as well, just because he has been shooting the basketball a lot. 14 shot attempts the last 2 games, and he hasn't even shot it well. I mean, 3 for 8 is fine, but 2 for 10, like that's terrible. Right. And so he could those two could be sneaky, and obviously you can play Bogdanovich in the guard spot. So I don't mind that call at all. That the thought that you had with Orlando, I think, is great with Fultz being there, but also pretty good leverage spot if he sits. Like we're not going to get that news probably until after the Milwaukee Indy game is started. And so if Fultz sits, like they could still be probably a little bit undervalued. But if obviously Markelle Fultz plays, then they're not going to be as good ones. So it seems like you either go in on them or you're kind of fading them. I don't mind that idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, if you go with Fultz, just make sure you're able to pivot to Suggs or Cole Anthony, I think, which should be pretty easy to do. Just put him in your utility or the G spot. It's a G spot, the guard spot on DK. But yeah, if Fultz is out, he is cheaper than both Suggs or Anthony are. So unless you have another player, you can do a 2 for 2. Maybe leave a little bit of extra salary on the table. If he's in, you're going to get a little different because you're not using all your salary. If he's out, you can pivot up to Suggs. So just maybe leave 500 on the table if you have Fultz, just in case, because Suggs would be an obvious pivot there. You probably get him lower owned than he should be in that situation too.
All right. So apparently we just got news that Dame is out. So let's just touch on that.
Yes. So I'm refreshing my news feed here too. So Dame definitely out. Do we know about Giannis yet?
I think he's going to play. I don't want to say it's safe to assume he's going to play, but let's just operate under the fact that Giannis is going to play. So where are we looking at? I'm going to look at the on-off court percent stuff real quick. If you just kind of want to touch on your thoughts.
Yeah, so the first thought I have is if Dame is out and Giannis is in, I want Giannis in almost every single lineup. Even if he only plays 29, 30 minutes, he should easily hit value. We saw it all last season with Drew there instead of Dame, that he was consistently putting up numbers, and he's cheaper than he was all last season because he has been sharing the floor with Dame. So honestly, Giannis would be the best piece of chalk on the slate. He should be 80% owned plus on everything. Unless he gets ejected because the ref wants to show off, he's going to be the best player on the slate. So load up on him. Mm-hmm. Second thought is I think Campaign's going to start directly in Dame's plays. I think that makes the most sense. So Campaign's going to be one of the better value plays. Again, not always the best fantasy producer, but if he's going to play 30 minutes, I think he should hit value very easily on both sites. The real
not to cut you off on Campaign, but just looking at it right now, like just given the slate, I feel like he is someone we could have sort of been looking at in general. Like it wouldn't have been great, but if he could have given us like 18 or so DraftKings points at 3.7, like that would have been fine. And so that was already slightly in consideration, but now you tack on the fact that we can lock in like 25 minutes. We're probably expecting at least 20 fantasy points. So definitely too low, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So yeah, definitely campaign. I mean, the tricky thing is Middleton because he's been playing 21 minutes a night. Got the rest last night. I think the most minutes we see out of him is 24. And with the increased usage, he's like almost a decent play there, but it's very risky because you're only going to get 24 minutes. So if he's not productive in those minutes, you're screwed. I don't know that I'm going to get to him much. I'll keep an eye on ownership. If he's completely unowned, which I don't imagine he will be, I'll probably mix in a few shares because he does still have a ceiling with Dame off the floor in 24 minutes, even at 6K. Again, it's a 2-game slate. On a bigger slate, I wouldn't even think twice about it. But yeah, I think after Payne, the next piece of value we're going to want to look at is probably Malik Beasley. I do imagine we see extra usage for him. He could do a little bit of ball handling as well in that backcourt with campaign. And then, yeah, I mean, the trickle down does help guys like Lopez. I don't think we see Portis start. I don't mind him. But again, he's a better play when Giannis is out. I don't know that we're getting the major correlation there with Dame being out of the lineup. So, again, this is all under the assumption that Giannis is in, but Giannis is the top priority after that campaign. And then probably third, Malik Beasley for me. I don't know if that's the same for you. And Jay Crowder's cheap on both sites. Any extra minutes for him are going to make him viable. But yeah, I think we're going to want at least probably 4 pieces from Milwaukee with Dame out.
All right. Yeah. So just as an FYI, the data hasn't updated just yet. It probably will in about, 2 or 3 minutes here. I do just want to read off the minutes with Dame Lillard off the court. Now, he's been playing heavy minutes, so it's tough to really gauge, but campaign was number 1, and that's actually Bobby Portis, which is yeah. And then there's a big drop. Then it goes Giannis, Pat Connaughton, Marjan Beauchamp. Those are all kind of jumbled together. Another big drop, Crowder, AJ Green. And then if you look at the usage bumps, it kind of makes sense. Like Marjan Beauchamp does get a big bump, 9% bump in usage, but I don't think we really care about that. Middleton, 7% bump in usage. Pat Connaughton, 4, and then Bobby Portis, 10. So it's probably too small of a sample size to really have any takeaways from that. But maybe Bobby Portis is a decent GPP play, and maybe Beauchamp at a very low-owned GPP play is not bad. Like he's 6% right now. Do you see that really coming up too much for Marjan?
Maybe like to 15-ish. Like I don't think he's going to be chalk at all. If he starts, I think he could climb over 20. Yeah. But yeah, I think as it stands, he's going to be one of the lower owned bucks. So I'm with you. He's definitely viable as a tournament play.
Yeah, so I might go Beasley or Portis as a fine play. I don't know. I'm just going to put him in there for now. I think that's a good starting point. Okay. I'm surprised that Brook wasn't popping up as much because we saw him last year kind of dominate. And so let's actually talk about the centers that we have on the slate. And one of the comments was, hey, what are your thoughts on Miles Turner on this slate? So let's just start out with Miles Turner there.
Yeah, I mean, he's about priced where he should be. I think point per dollar, maybe he's not the most appealing play on the slate, but as far as like a ceiling goes for a true center, if you're not including Giannis, arguably the best center play on the slate, pricing not considered. So I do like Turner here. I think he's fine. Much easier to get to on DK where you can play 2 centers. And he's also cheaper on DK, which we don't often see. So I do like him on both sides, prefer him on DraftKings. But he's not going to be too popular on either side, I think. So I do like him as a tournament play. I probably wouldn't use him in cash or single entry.
Yeah. So do you have a read on what's going on with his minutes? Is it just simply foul trouble or games blowing out? Like it seems like that, but I don't know if we have anything else.
I would like to dig into it more. I don't have a great read on it right now. I mean, we've seen him play up to 30 minutes a couple times this season, and I think most of their games have been competitive. So, yeah, it's really tough to say. It's like they just want to kind of limit him, but then I'm looking at the teams they're playing, and I don't know. It's bigger front courts that he's kind of getting rested against. So I don't think it's a matchup thing either. Maybe it's just, I don't know. He's had an injury history. Maybe they're just being cautious, which does make someone like Jalen Smith at least somewhat interesting as a value play. I do think Smith's viable as value on both sides. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a good reason for the cap on his minutes right now. And I don't know that it's a hard cap. I think in competitive games, he could see up to 30 minutes. So in tournaments, you're chasing the ceiling. Like, again, I'm not using him in single entry or lower risk contest. I'm chasing his upside at lower ownership. So, you're making a bit of a gamble on his minutes by rostering him. But if he gets 30 at low ownership, he should easily hit value. So good read in so few words.
Yeah. And it's funny because like when you're talking about him, like should be like the Atlanta situation where the minutes are just being split up, but like the Pacers don't really have anyone to go to unless it is Jalen Smith. But looking at the Atlanta Hawks, is there anyone we should be playing here? I mean, we do like Inyika at his current price tag, but does that kind of shift now with the news that we got with the Bucks, especially with Jalen Smith being a pretty good value, or are we just looking at Inyika as still a good value play?
I mean, I still think he's a good value play. I don't think he's as vital as he was before. Like if Dame was in, again, I said most of the value is going to come from Atlanta. But again, we have Dame out now. I still think he's too cheap on DK. He's really unplayable near 6K on FanDuel, but 4,200, you really only need like 18 minutes out of a congregate value there. It's not a bad matchup either against Goga and whatever's left of the Magic front court. So I like him. I still think he's good value. I'm hoping the ownership comes down. If he's still the highest on play on the slate, which I don't imagine he will be, I'd probably get away from him a little bit in tournaments. But at the price, he's still tough to get away from as things stand.
I do just want to talk about the Orlando situation as well. So on the last slate, I was like, given the ownership for Goga and given the ownership for Mo Wagner, I was like, we need to be on Mo more than Goga. And I'm looking at the ownership right now, and it's basically even. I mean, on FanDuel, we're seeing Goga be chalk, which to me does seem to be kind of strange. What are your kind of thoughts there with those two?
Yeah, I mean, Goga's the true center, and he's very productive when he's on the floor. I mean, I don't know. I think it makes sense to pivot a little bit in tournaments. We've seen some really solid games out of Mo.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Mo plays the wing a little bit too, and I'm wondering if Fultz being back could cut into that production a little bit. Again, it's not like a direct situation where like he's a guard, but when we see him on the wing, we see a little bit of extra usage for him. So I don't know. I like both. I prefer Goga. I think he's safer, but I totally agree where they're owned. If they're owned the same, I prefer Goga, but if Wagner's going to be a fraction of Goga's ownership, I think that's a very easy pivot to make a tournament.
Yeah.
So the rest of your lineup is shocking.
Yeah, so I would like on FanDuel, I think that's still the way to go, where it's 42 to 2%, and they're basically the same price. On DraftKings, we got Mo a little bit cheaper. They're about the same ownership. Probably don't need to stress that too much. I do want to get caught up on a couple of questions here. Ty Washington is even on the slate here.
Is he on the Bucks these days? I don't think so.
That's are players getting called up that we don't know about? That's what I'm wondering here.
I mean, last I checked, he was on the Rockets. I don't think they kept him around, so someone picked him up. I mean, I'm guessing whoever said that knows he's on the Bucks, but I would say no, it is not Ty Washington season. But I got to do some Googling and figure out where the hell he's at, because
I would assume it. I would assume it would have been Wigginton, but. Like, I don't even know if he's up there. It's probably, is it AJ Green, right? We have him projected for minutes, so he's probably the backup right now. So,
I don't even know if he's with the team, Washington. But he is on the Bucks. He's been with the Wisconsin Herd in the G League. I don't think we need to get there.
All right. So, and then we had Naismith as a good pivot from Brown. I'm assuming that's a question for FanDuel, given his ownership there.
No, definitely. I think in tournaments, if you're getting a low on Naismith, he's priced the same. It's just, it's similar to the Goga-Wagner situation. More often than not, Goga's going to be the better play. More often than not, Brown's going to be the better play. But at their respective ownerships, it's very logical to pivot to Naismith. We've seen some pretty solid games out of him lately. You're not going to get those ceiling games out of him as frequently as you will Brown or third, but when he's much lower owned on a 2-game slate, I don't mind it at all as a way to get different.
Yeah. And then we have this question as well. Let's pop it up. So for DFS, when is it the best time to use solvers and enter lineups? So I'm not, how much do you max enter? Because I can answer this one because I do it a decent amount.
Yeah, I mean, I used to more than I have been lately, but I mean, to answer the question, as close to lock as possible. Like, I think most of the pros are really uploading like with a minute to spare. Like, you want to get as much news in there as possible, and you also want to be able to late swap if you need to. So, all the news matters in NBA.
And so to kind of touch on that further, I would say you definitely want to be doing it hours before lineup lock, like start off doing it, seeing kind of where the roster constructions are coming out, seeing kind of your ownerships and whatnot. Then maybe midway through the day, check it again, seeing where you're getting, and then probably an hour before lineup lock, run it again, see your ownerships. That way, when the news comes out, you can pivot to that, because I mean the data will update pretty fast, don't get me wrong, but there are sometimes some situations where maybe the data doesn't pick up on that update, and we saw that at the beginning of the season a decent amount. But that's where you can know where to go to make those manual pivots. But for the most part, yes, like a minute before, you want to be prepared to do that. But I would say hour, half an hour, 10 minutes, 1 minute would be the best thing for that last hour. Like if you're max entering, you need to be putting a lot of effort into that if you want to have good returns. Like that is how you're successful. And then we have another question. Buddy Hield and Benedict Mathurin as fades on FanDuel. We said kind of maybe one, not both, or that was with Brown as well.
Yeah. I mean, Hield is very scoring dependent, but he's probably too cheap at 5,200. I wouldn't call them like full out fades. I also don't think there'd be like in the first lineup I build on FanDuel. I think they're fine. They're both reasonably owned compared to some of the other guard values. So yeah, they're okay. I'm not going to say don't play either. I wouldn't want both in the same lineup, but yeah, on a 2-game slate, you have to kind of consider almost everyone who's going to get regular minutes.
All right, so I want to refresh the data here again, seeing if we're getting it updated just yet. I know the ownership's been updating, but I don't know if we don't have a confirmed lineup, I don't think, just yet. So it might not be.
The Giannis, we're still waiting to get Giannis confirmed in. I mean, the projected lineups I'm seeing just have Payne replacing Dame directly, as we kind of expected, but nothing official yet.
And so this ownership hasn't changed too much just yet. Again, I think the biggest one will come at 5:30, and then it updates every minute here. So before we finish the video, we'll refresh this again. Very interesting there. Let's go ahead and just kind of give the closing thoughts on this build. So I kind of have one going right now just based off of what we were talking about. So I have Fultz in the point guard spot, have the shooting guard forward spot open. I have Giannis at the power forward, at Bobby Portis at the center. We could put Enyik in there. It doesn't really matter. Campaign in the G spot, and then the F spot's open as well. So where should I be going then with the guard spot? Is it maybe DeJounte Murray, maybe Chris Middleton, Jalen Suggs, eat that chalk, maybe Malik Beasley?
Yeah, we have a lot of salary left. I was going to say Beasley, but if we have as much as we do, I mean, I do really like Murray at his price.
Yeah, we can try to get Murray in there. I'm just switching Portis to the forward spot here. Nice. All right, so Murray in the shooting guard spot. I kind of like that. 6.3 left over. We still could go Beasley. We could go Crowder. But for the small forward spot, we got Wagner, Buddy Hield, Chris Middleton, Bruce Brown, Smith, Hunter, Bay, or Bogdanovich is kind of what I think that's where we get unique.
Yeah, I like Bogdanovich.
Okay, we'll go with him. Probably more upside, right?
Yeah.
And then 8.2 left over, guys. Banchero, that's probably the only one we can get in there then, considering the price.
Yeah, unless we upgraded something else. I'm fine with Banchero. Again, with Fultz back, that could cut into his upside. He does feel a little bit overpriced.
I would rather get to like Jalen Smith because he's so cheap, and I think we should eat that chalk.
Okay.
And then, is there a better center? No, not really. Giannis at center? Is there a better power forward? No.
I mean, we could get Jalen Johnson in, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah. Do we? Well, maybe we can upgrade from Bogdanovich. So let's try that real quick. Portis in the center spot. That's the issue now. We almost have too much decent value on a small 2-game slate that it's going to make it difficult. Yeah. Do you have a favorite forward? Like, would you go Wagner? Are you fine with him? Or would you go Middleton hoping for 30? Or
yeah, it's tough. I mean, I do really like the value from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Bogdanovich probably would be the first guy. Okay, so Johnson only has power forward eligibility. I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah. We'll put Smith in the forward spot here.
Okay.
And then 8.3. Or do you want to go Jalen Johnson? Do you think he has a little bit more soon?
Yeah. I mean, if Smith's chalk, I do like it, but I don't know that we even need it.
6.1. I don't. Suggs?
Bruce Brown. Lopez, maybe. We already have Portis.
Actually, I don't mind that. That'd kind of be
it'd be different. Yeah, to have all three bigs for the Bucks, and they all.
And you're still eating chalk. That's not bad.
Not bad. Not bad.
Not bad. So I need to bring this up. Did I get your handle wrong again? Is it Nick Marro DFS or is it just Nick Marro?
No, you got it. You got it.
Okay, thank goodness. I just wanted to make sure.
No worries.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give the Discord plug here, and then we'll probably be getting out of here in a couple of minutes. So if you guys have any questions, get those in. But here is the Discord. We're going to be going live in there in a second. I shouldn't say someone from the Occupy Fantasy team is going live in there. But yeah, jump in there, guys. It's going to be live before lock. Once we get news on the Milwaukee starting lineup, we'll be able to touch on that. We'll give you our cash and GPP plays for FanDuel and DraftKings, kind of our safe and GPP plays, and just give you guys the closing thoughts on that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our closing thoughts for the slate. I mean, we touched on it. It's a 2-game slate, right?
Yeah, I mean, our closing thoughts are the same as our main thoughts in that. I mean, if Giannis is in, have him in everything. If Giannis is out, you're still going to want Bucks and everything. I mean, the Bucks really are the key to the slate now. Pick your value spots. I mean, you don't have to eat all the chalk tonight. Like we said, there's a lot of good value for a 2-game slate, which is pretty rare. Mix in some of those Atlanta pieces. We should see the ownership plummet on those guys. But again, just keep an eye on the news. We still have to wait on Fultz. I think he'll be in. Still have to wait on Giannis. I think he'll be in. But again, it's the NBA. It's not always going to go how we expect.
Yeah, so looking at the updates I just did, Giannis 66% on DraftKings, 88% on FanDuel. I'd say let's get that to 88% on DraftKings. But then campaign is pretty chalk, about 50% on. I think that'll still climb, and that's pretty much spread out. So you could get some decent leverage actually on the Bucks there. And then we did have one last question I want to touch on: is Banchero chalk on FanDuel, or is he overpriced on FanDuel?
I mean, I don't love the price. On a 2-game slate, though, just as a way to get different, I think he's fine, though. 7,900. There's not a strong mid-range tonight. Like, you have the guard plays that are kind of on the upper end. You have Giannis, and then that's kind of it. So, on a bigger slate, I'd say he's overpriced. On a 2-game slate, I still think you want to probably get some. I will be getting Banchero on FanDuel.
Okay, so yeah, that is going to be all, guys. We did just get confirmation that Giannis is going to be in. And yes, the ownerships are on the rise. So be in the Discord chat so we can talk about all that stuff. Thank you guys for being here.
Take care, everyone.